This is the hydraulic ram and latch mechanism of a Mercedes R129 at the top of the windshield. In part 1 of this series, we showed you how to safely remove this mechanism from the car. You now have some options on how to handle the leaking seal in the hydraulic ram. You could buy an entirely new unit or buy a rebuilt one. You could send yours out for a rebuild or rebuild it yourself with a new seal. You can also rebuild it using an O-ring. You could buy a used one from a salvage yard or simply never operate the top again. We're going to use an O-ring to replace the seal, which has pluses and minuses to it. A 4mm Allen wrench is used to remove the hydraulic ram from the latching mechanism. Now these two bolts are pretty tight in there, so you may have to use a clamp or a vise to hold it in order to get them out. Once the bolts are loose, you can easily remove them by hand and set them aside carefully, and then tilt the hydraulic ram up perpendicular to the latch mechanism. The latch mechanism has a square block and the rod has a square shank that perfectly accommodate open-end 7mm and 10mm wrenches in order to separate the two parts of the assembly. Now these two parts are firmly threaded together, so you may require a little force to separate them. Once you've got them loose, you can easily spin the hydraulic ram, the cylinder and rod away from the latch mechanism. Do not allow any scratches on this rod or the seal will always leak. The ram has an end cap that is held in by a small internal spring clip. I think you can kind of see it in here. We're going to have to pry that out. You and everyone in the room should wear safety goggles. As you pry and bend on this clip, it's going to come rocketing out of that cylinder at about 300 miles an hour, headed right for your face. So be very careful as you remove this clip out of the end of the cylinder bore. With the clip out, that end cap still has a tight fit, so I'm going to thread it back on the mechanism slightly to give me the leverage so that I can pull that whole assembly out of the hydraulic ram cylinder. Now let's take a look at the components that are inside that hydraulic ram cylinder. There's the aluminum cylinder, there's a rod and piston, a flat washer, a seal, and the end cap seal cup. A small screwdriver lets us pry out the factory seal, which is round but has a square section. These are an excellent design for what is known as a dynamic seal, something that has a part like a shaft that moves through it. 24 years old, this one has deteriorated and started to leak. The O-ring we are using is the same diameter, but it is thinner and it has a round section. Although it will seal well, it will not last as long as a dynamic seal with a moving part. Now is a good time to clean all of the parts, and I also want you to put a thin film of hydraulic fluid on everything so it doesn't start up dry the first time. So we'll put the O-ring into the seal cup, and then we're going to put that flat washer back on the seal cup, kind of keeping it all in, and then slide that whole assembly back on the piston shaft. We can then put it all back together, piston, rod, cup seal, into the hydraulic cylinder. The seal cup doubles as the end cap held in by that spring clip, and I'm going to use this 11mm deep socket to press it into the end of the cylinder. Now this is going to take some finagling and a lot of force, so let's make sure we get our safety goggles back on before we even start. Several minutes and 17 swear words later, we have that spring clip back in place, and our O-ring hydraulic ram cylinder is rebuilt and ready to reinstall. In our final episode, we'll show you how to put the hydraulic ram back in the car. We'll show you how the numbers stamped on the hydraulic ports will help you keep the cylinder turned around in the correct orientation because they coincide with the hydraulic lines above the windshield. We'll clip the hydraulic lines back on, bolt the whole thing in, give it a good test, and get the whole thing back together again. So I thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.